Rowan, maybe you can explain to me, which Black Lives Matter?
Andrew, that's a very easy question to answer. The Black lives that fit the stereotype that the left wants Black lives to be. So if you are of the left, particularly the hard left, but even the normal left, the only Black lives that matter are those that fit a stereotype. Now, this is racism. The problem with racism was that if you go back to the pre-civil rights era in Australia or America or anywhere else, Black people had to fit a certain stereotype. Now the left are demanding a new stereotype, and that stereotype is very simple. You have to be the victim of an injustice perpetrated not by a Black person. So that's the definition, that's the stereotype of the Black lives that matter to the left. As you said, Nareda Yumgar, who was there in that video, excellent video. It's about 3 or 4 minutes long, or even longer, 5 minutes long. And she, in the middle, you had a small part of it there, Andrew. There's a bit later on towards the end where Nestrida is surrounded by a group of people, all with their faces covered. You can't see them. They're yelling at her, they're screaming at her, they're telling her to go away and leave them alone and to head off down the street. If you were, coming from Mars and you were told that there was a group of people, predominantly white, by the way, wearing their faces covered, screaming at a Black woman to go and leave them alone and to disappear, you would think you were looking at the Ku Klux Klan back in the 1950s or 1960s. But in fact, it is the Antifa mob. We're wearing their face masks, covering their faces, abusing and screaming at a Black woman simply, and she is African-American in that she actually came from Africa and moved to America. She knows what genuine racism, genuine evil, genuine injustice within countries looks like. And she repeatedly says, Andrew, I am not oppressed. Don't try and paint me as someone who is oppressed. I am not oppressed. I can do whatever I like. No one is oppressing me other than you, she said, to the white Antifa people who are demanding that she leave their demonstration because she wants to know why they don't care about the Black lives killed in only a few miles away by Black men in some of the neighborhoods of Washington.
Gee, that is an excellent summary, Rowan. Can you explain to me another thing, why so many journalists are cheering for the rioters? Here is one of them, CNN presenter Chris Cuomo, who's brother of the governor of New York.
Now, too many see the protests as the problem. No, the problem is what forced your fellow citizens to take to the streets: persistent and poisonous inequities and injustice. And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
There's something so bracing about a rich white man preaching about injustice, but here is the ABC today actually celebrating a Washington man who hid rioters from the police.
One Washington, D.C. man's captured national attention for helping a group of protesters escape police. When a large protest which took place in defiance of a curfew was broken up out front of his house, Raul Duby allowed more than 50 demonstrators to shelter in his home for the night, meaning they avoided arrest.
You would have done the same thing.
So you just thought, enough's enough?
Can you explain all that, Rowan?
Yes, well, first of all, I'll answer that question that Cuomo put. Where does it say that protesters have to be peaceful? Very simple. The greatest, possibly civil rights leader of all time, or one of the several, was Mahatma Gandhi, who invented non-violent protest. He actually he got the British Empire to stand down and liberate the entire Indian subcontinent, which was his goal, and he did it via non-violent protest. That was his whole message, was that it was more powerful to sit there and not be violent, but to just get your message across peacefully. This tactic was copied by Martin Luther King, later on in life by Nelson Mandela and other civil rights leaders. So the idea of the non-violent protest is actually incredibly successful, but is also highly moral. So that answers that question. The next thing which is the big lie here, Andrew, is the conflating of protesters and looters. So that's what's happening. You didn't hear any of them say, I'm distinguishing between protesters and looters. These are two entirely separate categories. The protesters, some of whom may have gone on to become opportunistic looters, perhaps, But the looters weren't protesters. The looters were there out for what they were criminals, they were gangs, they were opportunists, they were everyday people who saw the breakdown of law and order and felt that they could profit from it, took advantage of it. There's extraordinary, all sorts of footage of people running in and out of Nike stores, helping themselves to whatever they can. This is just simply a breakdown of law and order. That's nothing to do with protesting. Okay, they might dress it up, but the authorities and the media must be held responsible for conflating the two and pretending that the protesters and the looters are one and the same. Because therefore, what happens if they pretend they're the same, Andrew, the moment a looter gets arrested, quite rightly, for breaking the law, this becomes the police being heavy-handed against the protesters. That's why you have to be so clear to define the two separately.
Well, so I have to say, they're depending what they're protesting, because some of them actually do want revolution, and they don't mind breaking a few windows to get it. I think you know, there have been revolutionaries before.
They are the opportunistic protesters who are the violent hard left, Antifa and other groups like that, who are taking advantage of a legitimate grievance and turning it into insurrection and anarchy.